I want to start with a question that's haunted American culture for decades. How did I get here? That line comes from David Byrne in Once in a Lifetime. What makes it powerful isn't just the lyric, but the way Byrne delivers it, half preacher, half prophet. It reminds us that so much of the American story is staged in that sermonic voice, a culture that defines itself through performance and ritual. And when he asks, "How did I get here?" it captures something we've all felt. The disorientation of living a life that seems assembled out of habits, expectations, even scripts we didn't necessarily write ourselves.
I love how you put that, Simon. And that's exactly where we're headed today. We want to trace this arc, starting with Walt Whitman's vision of the self as abundant and democratic, then moving through Wellville's obsession with bodily purity, the confrontational therapies of EST, Tony Robbins' stadium firewalks, Ted's curated insights, influencer culture's rituals of discipline, and finally, Pete Hegseth's version of militarized patriot wellness. When you line it up, it really does feel like an ongoing sermon, each era building its own stage, complete with props, codes, and rituals that define who belongs. But I want to throw something back at you. Do you think this sermonizing is uniquely American, tied to our history of revival tents and self-help entrepreneurs? Or is it a universal thing, that every culture stages its meaning through performance, just with different accents and different sets of symbols?
It's a fair question. Every culture stages meaning, but the American mix of revival religion, frontier self-invention, and media markets turns self-recasting into a public habit. Identity here is often assembled and rewarded when it performs well. You can hear it in the preacher cadence and see it on the stages, from tents to TED to the Pentagon podium. So let's trace how that takes shape, one step at a time.
All right, let's go back to the roots. Whitman. Let's actually read him. I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. It's poetic, yes, but also radical. He's making his own body, his own life, into a public work of art. In Whitman's hands, the body isn't just flesh, it's a sign of possibility, democratic, open, generous. His I slips into you, collapsing the line between speaker and listener. What he's doing there is turning selfhood into a performance of inclusion, an invitation. And that sets the stage for how America would keep treating wellness as something visible, something staged, a code for belonging.
Whitman's vision really is extraordinary in its openness. He imagined America as a place where performance, if we call it that, was rooted in authenticity. It was about communion, not control. Every gesture carried weight because it connected the self to the collective. Life became a kind of living art, thick with democratic meaning. What stands out is the sense of abundance, the idea that identity could expand, not shrink. And that makes the turn we're about to trace so striking, because in the century after Whitman, performance around wellness shifts from that expansive vision into something narrower, more about discipline and purity than openness.
And the language, the I, it so quickly flips to you and we, so you feel those boundaries dissolve between writer and reader. It's radical, because Whitman isn't just speaking for himself, he's staging connection in real time. And we still hear echoes of that today in all those mantras. I am enough. You are worthy. But don't you think they've been flattened out, stripped of Whitman's depth and turned into these soundbite affirmations that circulate on Instagram feeds? They gesture toward meaning, but without the weight of Whitman's communion, they end up more like slogans than invitations.
Absolutely. What once had complexity and depth often gets reduced to wellness catchphrases. Whitman's sense of abundance now feels commodified, almost like it's been flattened into self-help slogans and Instagram mantras. Still, the hunger for it is real. That's why these scripts keep circulating. People are still searching for connection, even if the language has thinned out. And that's what makes the next chapter so interesting, because the way America tried to satisfy that hunger after Whitman wasn't through poetry or openness, it was through institutions like Wellville, where wellness got reframed as discipline, purity, and control.
Let's jump to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Wellville, the Battle Creek Sanitarium, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg's domain. He turned health into a kind of stage where the pure body signaled the virtuous soul. Everything was ritualized: bathing ceremonies, regimented diets, prescribed exercises. The whole atmosphere was about discipline and control, the belief that moral elevation could be achieved through bodily performance. And the semiotics are clear. Water wasn't just about hygiene, it symbolized purification. Food wasn't just sustenance, it was coded as virtue or sin. The sociolinguistic piece comes in Kellogg's strict, almost sermon-like prescriptions, the body framed as a site of redemption. It was an early moment where wellness stopped being just about health and became a public ritual, a visible code for belonging and respectability.
Indeed, and then a century later, you land in the 1970s with Est. Those transformation workshops were pure theatre. The whole point was breakdown as spectacle. Est wasn't interested in subtlety or softness. The method was to confront you, strip away defenses, and claim that humiliation was the gateway to transformation. Think about the semiotics here. The name tag wasn't just a label, it was a symbol of surrendering your individuality to the ritual, sitting in tight formation, coded obedience. The leader's voice carried like a sermon, commanding silence, repetition, and compliance. Even the rule that you couldn't take a bathroom break turned the body itself into a stage for discipline. It was catharsis as performance, a dramatic inversion of Whitman's expansive self. Instead of "I contain multitudes," you were reduced, broken down, and rebuilt inside someone else's script.
The command was simple: don't resist. That was the heart of it. The whole ritual stripped away agency. Some people saw that as democratizing self-help because it cut through the polite surface and got right to raw confrontation. But you have to ask, is replacing communion with obedience really liberation? The language shifts from Whitman's "I celebrate myself" to a command that erases the self. It's not dialogue, it's discipline. And that's where the performance flips, from expansive invitation to controlled submission.
Or are we just normalizing new forms of control and calling it transformation? That's the question we keep circling back to. What starts as liberation? Whitman's expansive "I celebrate myself" gets rescripted as obedience, discipline, or spectacle. And once it's staged that way, the language makes it sound natural, even necessary. Est said, "Don't resist." Robbins framed it as "unleash the power," and Ted softened it into ideas worth spreading. Different tones, same grammar. Each promises freedom, but often what you get is a new kind of script to follow. Tony Robbins scaled up that Est logic and brought it into stadiums. The firewalk is the perfect spectacle, a literal walk through fear, every step a public performance of mastery. You've got tens of thousands of people watching, cheering, almost like a revival tent in corporate drag. The message is the same. Transformation is real if you can prove it with your body. And then we get to TED. All that raw catharsis gets sanded down and polished. You step into the red circle, not to scream or break down, but to deliver a carefully curated insight. It's the same sermonic tradition, but now with story arcs, rehearsed pauses, and a slide deck. Everyone's got their TED story, short, personal, and wrapped in authority. What Robbins made visceral, TED made intellectual. Both turned meaning into a performance you could package and replicate.
Right, Robbins is all booming imperatives. You can do this. Take control. His language is about command, energy, momentum. Ted, on the other hand, leans into, let me tell you a story. That's a softer code, but it's still performance. One style builds trust through urgency and physical spectacle, the other through intimacy and narrative. Robbins gives you the firewalk, dramatic proof of mastery. Ted gives you the fireside talk, curated, intellectual belonging. Both appeal, but in very different registers of persuasion.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we're too quick to dismiss the value of spectacle or even of polished inspiration. Those moments can really move people, even if they're theatrical. A firewalk or a TED talk can be genuinely transformative for someone in the audience. But what interests me is how, beneath both, the ritual of performance gets more and more refined, almost codified as a kind of secular liturgy. Robbins' imperatives create energy like a revival tent. TED stories deliver insight like a modern sermon. Different registers, but both are ways of staging belief, giving people scripts for how to imagine themselves.
You know where this flips? Walter White. He isn't performing for communion anymore, but for survival and dominance. I am the one who knocks. That line alone says it all. The hat, the lab, each becomes a prop in the performance. Heisenberg isn't just an alias. He's a persona carefully crafted to project control while everything else in his life collapses. It's performance as deception, performance as desperate assertion of self. Where Whitman staged abundance, Walter stages scarcity and fear.
Yes, it's the other end of Whitman's I contain multitudes. Walter's I isn't abundant, it's menacing, singular, exclusionary, even threatening. Psychologists talk about this in terms of cognitive dissonance and moral disengagement, the ways we justify actions by shifting our standards. And culturally, it feels like a signal. Performance has shifted, no longer about authenticity or art, but about control, about survival dressed up as power. And I keep wondering, Angela, was Walter White meant as a warning? Or did he end up as a kind of dark hero some audiences admired even while he embodied the collapse of communion into domination?
It's ambiguous, isn't it? The fact that audiences split on Walter White says a lot about where we are culturally. Some people read him as a warning, a portrait of collapse. Others treated him almost like a dark hero, someone taking control in a chaotic world. And that divide reflects how fractured we've become about these rituals of meaning. For one group, performance is still supposed to be authentic, about family, connection, integrity. For another, performance is survival, control, dominance, proving you're not weak. It's two very different codes running at the same time, and that tension sets the stage for what comes next. The rise of influencers who turn that same logic into a visible, everyday performance of resilience, discipline, and belonging.
So after Walter White, you move right into social media's age of influence. Authority shifts away from expertise and into visibility. It's all about discipline made public. You prove your worth by how well you perform. Transformation, resilience, control. Wellness influencers, military PT videos, curated images of six-packs and smoothie bowls. These aren't just lifestyle choices, they're signs of belonging, coded through the body. And here's the shift. Expertise doesn't matter as much anymore. What matters is fluency in the grammar of performance. Can you stage the right rituals, show the right progress, post the right evidence? That's what earns trust. Transformation isn't just private anymore, it has to be visible, verified, and repeatable.
And then we get Pete Hegseth, reframing grooming and fitness as patriotic, almost martial duty. In his Pentagon directives, fitness, grooming, and compliance become national performance standards. If you dissent, resign. It's the body politic, literally. The body itself is proof of belonging. What strikes me is how familiar it feels. Step back, and these are just new American initiation rituals. From revival tents to est, from TikTok challenges to Pentagon speeches. The scripts change, but the function is persistent. You prove your worth by enacting the performance laid out for you.
That's really the question, isn't it? Are we actually innovating or just updating the same old performance codes? From Whitman to Wellville, from Est to Ted, from Walter White to Hegseth, the signs and scripts keep shifting, but the underlying pattern is stubbornly consistent. We stage wellness as proof of belonging. We rehearse transformation as ritual. And we keep circling back to Burns' refrain. How did we get here? Maybe the harder question is, can we get somewhere different?
But there's a darker undercurrent here. Wellness has become a sorting mechanism. The people who can perform it get rewarded, and everyone else is left behind. You see it in mental health, the rise of solo living and the pull of digital detachment. Fitness trackers and meditation apps signal resilience, but they can also mask loneliness and exclusion. The signs of wellness, steps logged, streaks maintained, curated posts, become less about health and more about proving you belong. And that creates fragility. There's less and less space for those who don't play the part, and trust itself starts to erode. Especially now when even the visual language we rely on is unstable. Manipulated images, deepfakes, polished feeds. If wellness is supposed to be a language of care, it's speaking more like a language of compliance, one where not everyone is allowed to answer back.
Yeah, and when you layer in things like return to office mandates, you see exactly who gets pushed out. Age, class, gender. They all shape who can keep up with the performance. Policies that are supposed to encourage resilience often just offload social problems onto individuals. It's privatized anxiety, and listen to the language: resilience, optimization, self-care. On the surface, they sound empowering, but more often they reframe structural failures, like the absence of paid leave or affordable care, as personal shortcomings. If you can't thrive under those conditions, the story goes, it's because you didn't optimize enough. That's the grammar of performance at work, shifting responsibility away from the system and onto the self.
That individualization can create new freedoms for some: autonomy, flexibility, the ability to write your own script. But at what cost? Does it inevitably erode the chance for real communal bonds? When wellness becomes something you perform alone, through apps, metrics, or curated posts, the language of self-care starts to feel like a substitute for care we might once have shared. The question is whether these new freedoms are actually expanding meaning or just isolating us further.
So here's what's at stake. Is wellness still about opening doors to liberation, or has it become just another script for compliance and control? That's the central tension. Has performance brought us closer together, like Whitman imagined? Or has it fenced us in with endless checklists and rituals that prove worth but rarely deepen connection? The very signs that once promised abundance, the body, the voice, the story, now risk being reduced to tokens of compliance. And the language we use, whether it's resilience or self-care, often tells us more about the system's demands than our own needs.
Maybe there's a way out. Imagine reforms that don't just put the burden on individuals, but actually build communal frameworks. Businesses and community groups could partner to make care affordable and accessible. We could tell stories that celebrate aging instead of treating youth as the only ideal. We could innovate in ways that let more people share wellness together rather than compete alone. At its core, it's about shifting the script back from just me to we, Because right now our symbols are colliding. Whitman's communion, Walter White's control, Hegseth's conformity. The question is which of those codes we want shaping our future. Do we keep rehearsing discipline as compliance, or do we restage performance as a collective ritual of meaning and belonging?
Right. And here's the question I keep circling. Can performance itself ever really be neutral? Or does the script always tilt toward hierarchy, even when we try to reset it? Rituals of meaning feel empowering at first, but the codes have a way of hardening into standards, and the language starts to carry authority with it. The red circle, the firewalk, the grooming directive, each begins as a gesture of possibility, but ends up policing the boundary of who belongs. To come back to Burns' refrain, how did we get here? It's still a living, nagging question, and honestly, I don't think we've landed on an answer yet. America is still on stage, rehearsing, revising, searching for the right script, the right performance. Sometimes it looks like communion, sometimes control, sometimes conformity, but the stage is still lit, the audience still watching, which means the script isn't finished. And maybe the real question is whether we have the imagination to write a different one.
Exactly. The challenge is set. Can we make our wellness into a poem, the way Whitman imagined, expansive and generous? Or are we destined to keep rehearsing Walter White's deceptions and Hegseth's discipline, running the same scripts of control over and over again?
Angela, thanks for navigating all this with me, and thanks to everyone listening. Stick with us. We'll be back with more fresh questions about culture and what's coming next.
Thanks, Simon, and thanks to you all. Take care and see you soon.